On September 12, 1977, under clear blue skies in the early morning hours, 20-year-old Ann Harmeier seemingly vanished without a trace. Her car, a 1971 Pontiac Le Mans, sat broken down alongside State Road 37, just 2 miles north of Martinsville, Indiana, and only 20 miles from her destination at Indiana University. Ann had been driving back to campus after spending the weekend with family and friends in Cambridge City. She was expected to call her mother once she arrived back safely, but that call never came. Instead, Ann disappeared in broad daylight alongside a busy highway, leaving behind questions that would haunt her family and the community for decades. So what really happened to Ann Harmeier? Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode. If you're new here, hi, my name is Shay and I'm your host of Matcha and Murder. New episodes go live every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, with the video version going live over on YouTube as well. Today, we're discussing a truly heartbreaking unsolved case that will leave you with lasting questions. So before we get into who Ann was, go ahead and grab your matcha and let's dive in. Ann Louise Harmeier was born on August 27, 1957, in New Castle, Indiana, but she grew up in Cambridge City. Her parents were Marjorie and Robert Harmeier, and sadly, Ann lost her father, Robert, to a brain tumor when she was just 4 years old. After that, it was mostly just Ann and her mom. Marjorie worked as a music teacher in the local schools, and the two were incredibly close. People who knew Ann described her as charismatic, polite, and just genuinely fun to be around. She was also very involved in school. She made the National Honor Society, and she was even crowned queen of Cambridge City's Fall Festival, which really speaks to just how well she was liked in her community. Ann's second cousin, Scott Burnham, once said, "Ann had a sparkle about her, a quality you don't find in a lot of people." And from what people have shared about her, that really seems to be true. But where Ann sparkled the most was on stage. Ann had a deep love for drama and music. While attending Lincoln High School, she starred as Nellie Forbrush in the musical South Pacific, where she quickly stood out as a natural performer. And those close to her believed she was destined for a career in acting or singing. So it made perfect sense that she decided to major in theater at Indiana University, the same university both of her parents had attended before her. And on Saturday, September 10th, 1977, Ann returned to Cambridge City for a weekend visit with family and friends, something she did many times before. She had originally planned to head back to campus on the night of Sunday, September 11th, but her mother Marjorie had convinced her to wait until the next morning, believing it would be safer for her to travel in the daylight. It's incredibly heartbreaking to look back on because Marjorie was just doing what any loving parent would do, trying to protect her daughter and make sure that she got home safely. And you can't help but feel the weight of that decision and imagine how that moment must have stayed with her for the rest of her life. And in the early morning hours of September 12th, Ann left a note under her mother's pillow like she usually did, thanking her for the weekend and telling her she loved her. Ann then packed her belongings into her car and prepared to make the over 100-mile drive back to Indiana University in Bloomington, as she had a class at 10:30 that morning. She promised her mother she would call once she arrived back at campus. She also promised to call a friend, Reverend Rose Tall, later that evening. During her drive, when she was only 20 miles from her destination, Ann's car began to overheat, causing the car to stall. She pulled over on the side of State Road 37, just over 2 miles north of Martinsville. It was later determined by police that her engine radiator was out of water, causing the car to stall. It was later confirmed that she had actually stopped at a few gas stations along the way so that they could take a look at the car. Later that night, after not receiving a call from Ann, Marjorie called her campus apartment multiple times but got no answer. Marjorie and Reverend Rose Tall obviously became worried after not being able to reach Ann, as this was completely unlike her. They decided to retrace Ann's steps back to campus that night. It was around midnight when the two found Ann's rust-colored Pontiac Le Mans locked with its hazard lights flashing on the side of State Road 37. They noticed that her books and laundry were still in the car, but her purse was gone. Marjorie and Rose then immediately went to the police and reported Ann missing. The entire community came together to help search for Ann. Donations were collected for a reward fund, 20,000 posters were distributed, bumper stickers were made, Billboards along State Road 37 were plastered with "Where is Ann?" and searches began. The town even gave long-haul truck drivers posters of Ann to take across country to get word of Ann's disappearance across the nation. With very little physical evidence, police had few leads to follow, leading investigators to piece together what might have happened in her final moments. Authorities focused on two main possibilities. One theory was that Ann, worried about missing her class, may have accepted a ride from a stranger, hoping to make it to campus on time, something that she typically wouldn't do. The other possibility being that someone forced her into their vehicle against her will. Unfortunately, 36 days later, on October 18, 1977, Ann Harmeier's body was discovered in a cornfield by a farmer harvesting his crops, just 4.5 miles from her abandoned car. Ann had been gagged with her hands tied behind her back with one of her shoelaces. Her underwear and jeans were pushed down to her ankles. Her bra was torn, and her IU sweater was pushed up around her neck. She had been sexually assaulted and ultimately strangled with a tourniquet made from her other shoelace and her hairbrush. And it's just really hard to wrap your head around the level of brutality that she went through. And it's hard not to get angry hearing those details. I mean, that level of violence, no one deserves to have their life end like that. By the time she was found, Ann's body was decomposed beyond recognition, and the coroner actually had to rely on dental records to confirm her identity. What makes this case even more terrifying is that Ann vanished in broad daylight along a highway that likely had commuters traveling through it, highlighting just how bold the perpetrator may have been. And yet, no one reported seeing her. Witnesses later reported that Ann had stopped in Indianapolis to buy a radiator cap at a gas station, clearly showing that she was having some car trouble. She even made another stop in Waverly, where a bystander helped her out by filling her radiator with water. A mechanic even offered to repair her car for her, but Ann was determined to make it back for her 10:30 a.m. class. So, hoping that quick fixes would hold, she took the chance and continued driving toward Bloomington. Her funeral was held on October 22nd, 1977 at the Presbyterian Church in Cambridge City, where it was filled with grieving family members and friends who gathered to honor Ann's life, and she was laid to rest next to her father. Indiana State Police and the Morgan County Sheriff's Office began an extensive investigation, working through long lists of men with prior sex-related convictions or histories of violent behavior, carefully clearing each one as they tried to narrow in on who could be responsible. A man by the name of Stephen Judy quickly became a prime suspect. He had previously sexually assaulted and murdered a woman, Terry Lee Chastain, with a tourniquet, after convincing her he was a good Samaritan and offering her a ride. Tragically, Terry's 3 young children, 5-year-old Misty, 4-year-old Stephen, and 2-year-old Mark were with her, and Judy killed them as well. After his arrest, Judy began confessing to several other crimes that police hadn't even connected him to. But when investigators asked him about Ann Harmeier, he denied any involvement. Judy was eventually sentenced to death by the electric chair in 1981 for the murders of Terry and her children. Despite how closely he seemed to fit the profile that investigators were looking at, he ultimately was ruled out of Ann's case after records confirmed that he was in the Marion County Jail on an unrelated charge at the time Ann disappeared. And after Ann's murder, Marjorie struggled deeply with the loss. Ann's cousin Scott later shared that his aunt never truly recovered and had in many ways lost her will to keep going. Tragically, she passed away from cancer in 1983, just 6 years after losing Ann, and she was laid to rest beside her daughter and her husband. Ann's case has since gone cold, but Scott believes there's still hope to solve her murder. He did file a Freedom of Information Act request for Ann's case files. However, the request was denied because the case is still active and open. Even without the reports, Scott is still determined and continues to look into Ann's case as much as he can, with as little information as he has. He has also started numerous social media pages dedicated to spreading information about Ann's case, which I will link in the description below. Ann Harmeier's life was tragically cut short. She was a young woman with dreams and a future she was working towards. A daughter, a friend, and a student who never made it to class that day. Cases like Ann's are especially heartbreaking because they remind us how quickly an ordinary moment can turn into something unimaginable. And even now, 49 years later, Anne is remembered by those who loved her and by the people who continue to share her story. And while her case still leaves behind unanswered questions, it also leaves behind an important reminder to never forget the person at the center of it all. Anne and the life she should have been able to live. Her story reminds us to look beyond the crime and hold on to hope that answers, accountability, and justice may one day be found. Thank you for spending time with me and for helping keep Anne's story alive. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a new case. Until next time, take care of yourselves and stay safe. Bye, everyone.